During the NES days, there were a lot of game developers and publishers that planted their flags and cemented themselves in the hearts and minds of gamers everywhere. Capcom, Konami, Squaresoft. Little did we know that these companies and their games would stay in our lives and continue to produce great games for many years to come. Then there's those companies that shut down, dropped off the radar, or became part of other companies, like Data East, Sunsoft, and the focus of this video, Enix. Back in 2003, Squaresoft and Enix merged to become Square Enix. All I remember thinking was back then, whoa, Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest under the same roof? That's insane! But before this merger, Enix published a lot of great games, like Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia, Star Ocean, and Valkyrie Profile. Now, a lot of these games I didn't play until way later in life, but there were a few I was able to get my hands on during my childhood and remember them fondly to this day. I want to share these games with you and explain how I remember them, so I really hope you enjoy. Dragon Quest, released in North America in August of 1989 on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Of course, I remember it as Dragon Warrior, before they finally decided to correct the name in North America with Dragon Quest VIII. Dragon Quest is an RPG where one hero has to restore the light to the land by defeating the Dragon Lord. Pretty simple and straightforward stuff compared to RPGs today. Now, I honestly don't remember if Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy was my first RPG. It was too long ago and I was really young when I first played both games. What I do remember is being really confused with it. At such a young age, games like Mega Man and Super Mario Bros. Appealed to me more because their sole focus was gameplay. In Dragon Quest, you got all this talking, you gotta pay attention and remember where you were told to go, this list of commands and trying to decipher when to use them, you gotta buy weapons, armor, items, you get magic spells, there's turn-based combat with HP and MP I have to manage, holy crap! All I could really grasp at this time was jump and shoot. Dragon Quest was like trying to get a 6-year-old to learn astrophysics. My young mind couldn't fucking take it. What I remember most was when exploring on the overworld, you could tread too far and get met with monsters that would straight up kick your ass. At the time, that's when I'd shut the game off. I just didn't get it. It wasn't until I got a little older and started playing RPGs on the Super Nintendo that I finally understood the importance of grinding levels and buying new equipment to get stronger. Then, as a young adult, with all my accumulated RPG experience, I was able to go back and beat Dragon Quest. And you know what? It's a pretty good game. I enjoyed it. But I'll always have the memories of first embarking in the genre of RPGs and just getting decimated, which in retrospect, tracks with almost all my first experiences with gaming on the NES. That's what the NES did. It beat us bloody over and over again until we were tempered in our own childhood agony and frustration to overcome its obstacles, which is probably why a lot of us go back to play games from this era, because now as an adult, we love the combination of simplicity and challenging difficulty. ActRaiser, released in North America in November of 1991 on the Super Nintendo. Yeah, we're jumping to some 16 bits. ActRaiser was one of the earliest titles to be released for the Super Nintendo, coming out 3 months after the console dropped in North America. And oh man, do I love this game. You play as the Master, who needs to rid the world of the evil one, Tanzra, but in reality, you are God fighting against Satan. This is one of the many games where religious terminology and ideas were changed in the United States, as there was a fear it would offend too many people. That happened a lot back in those days, where it seems some developers and publishers would change things in fear of losing sales stateside. But even as a kid playing ActRaiser, I could read between the lines. I'm God, and I need to slay the fucking devil. The game starts with a small scene with an angel giving you some backstory, but then you get thrown right into some awesome side-scrolling action. Whacking shit to death with your giant sword, beating a big old boss at the end, all to an absolutely bitchin' soundtrack. I remember just being blown away by this game's soundtrack and the graphics of the Super Nintendo. After beating the first boss, I thought, alright, we got a kick-ass side-scrolling adventure on our hands. But ActRaiser then throws you a curveball. You're brought to the overworld where you are told that you need to help the people of the land and grow their civilization. This can be done by guiding the people where to go to develop their cities. There are monsters about, so you take control of the angel and eliminate them so they don't do crazy shit, like try to steal the townspeople. You even have special powers, like the ability to bring down lightning to clear away terrain for further development. Eventually, the townspeople will develop new knowledge and technology, like the ability to seal monster dens or build bridges. Basically, my young mind looked at this as a 2D action game mixed with SimCity, and even then, I thought it was fucking awesome. 2 game genres put together? This was like a dream come true. It was like I got 2 games in one. My young brain didn't even fathom the possibility that this was even something that could happen. Up to this point, the games I played were very focused on their genre. A game was a platformer, an action game, an RPG. Everything seemed to stick to their role. But with ActRaiser, they said fuck that noise. Not only are you going to slay monsters, but you're going to manage civilizations as well. The game even manages to sprinkle in light RPG elements. As the population of the towns grow, you gain levels that increase your stats. This adds more motivation to grow your cities to the max population you can, so you have more of an advantage in action segments. They combine so brilliantly. ActRaiser introduced me to the idea that games can have many layers to it. It was the beginning of shedding off the simplistic skin that most games up to this point had, and showing the idea that a game can be more than just one thing. So of course, I was really excited when Enix released ActRaiser 2. My mind raced at the possibilities. What would they add to the city building aspect? Would there be more towns, more spells, bigger bosses? I was totally hyped. Well, the game looks and plays well, but the sequel completely removed the city building from the game. According to Wikipedia, ActRaiser 2 is made by the request and specifications of Enix of America, so the developer Quintet made that game, which is just solely a 2D side-scrolling action game. It's not bad at all, but doesn't measure up to its predecessor in my opinion. They took all the great layers from the original and just streamlined the action. It just seemed like Enix of America didn't understand ActRaiser in its totality, and looked at it as just another side-scroller. After ActRaiser 2, time went on, and it seemed the game just vanished. As I got older, I really wondered what happened to it, and it even became my most wanted game for either a remake or a new installment in the series. When years turned to decades, I lost hope that anything ActRaiser would ever crop up again. But then seemingly out of nowhere during a Nintendo Direct, ActRaiser Renaissance was shown, and it released the same day in September of 2021. Renaissance was a remake of the original, and I was super excited that ActRaiser finally came back. Now, I played and beat the game on the Switch, so I have no gameplay footage to show, but I can show trailers of the game. To put it bluntly, it's ActRaiser with a facelift, kind of. The action is good, the city building is great, but the character models and a lot of the enemy models look really weird and kind of cheap, almost as if they were cut out of something and pasted into a different environment. I don't know, it's really hard to explain, you just have to play it and see for yourself. Overall, I enjoyed Renaissance, and I'm glad ActRaiser got some attention. I have no clue what the future holds for it, but the original will always remain one of my favorite Super Nintendo titles. Brainlord, released in North America in October of 1994 on the Super Nintendo. I honestly have no clue how we got this game in our house or why, but I remember it fondly. I consider it an uncommon title, as going to school and talking about it, none of the other kids had any clue what I was talking about. Your character is a fabled dragon warrior. Sounds a bit familiar, and it's your duty to find the last remaining dragon. Plot-wise, it's really that simple, but where the game shines for me is its gameplay. The game is a top-down action game, very much like The Legend of Zelda, with bits of RPG elements sprinkled in. I remember the game looking pretty decent, except your character doesn't look like he's wearing pants and instead has these weird-ass duck feet. Combat is simple, you get a weapon, shield, and a magic attack. The magic is controlled by holding down the attack button, and the length of time you'd have to hold the button depends on the complexity of the spell. The gameplay is really great, and on the surface, it doesn't really appear to be anything special. But a cool feature this game adds are these familiars you get that follow you around and assist you. They can throw fireballs, increase your attack power, and even heal you. It honestly kind of reminded me of a shmup game where you can add allies that fly around you. As a kid, I was drawn into the gameplay, since Link to the Past was one of my favorite games at the time, so any game that reminded me of Zelda got me super interested. But as you discover the game's loop, it starts to get very different. You'll go to towns and crawl through a big dungeon with multiple levels and different obstacles to overcome. Outside of slaying enemies, there are traps to avoid, and even platforming segments. The game throws you into situations where you'll need to have good reflexes when an enemy suddenly appears, to then having to be patient while trying to cross an area. But the big feature coincides with the idea of the name of the game: puzzles, using your brain. Moving boulders and giant balls, manipulating big red balls, trying to not get killed by these balls. It's like you're stuck in a nutsack trying to survive with all these balls banging around. In my youth, the only puzzle games I remember really playing are Tetris and Quicks for the Game Boy. I've dealt with the puzzles in Zelda games, but never have experienced so much of it in a non-puzzle game before. The idea that I have to combine my combat skill with my brain power was pretty new to me in a video game. And the satisfaction of solving a puzzle and progressing was very addictive, and had its frustrating moments. The satisfaction of puzzle solving was met equal with the agony of having to be patient and think as a 10-year-old kid playing a video game. Once again, it was a concept that was new and I couldn't grasp it at the time. I gotta stop playing to figure out a puzzle? I don't want to do that, I just want to play the fucking game. The boss fights are pretty cool, and it wasn't too hard considering that if you had enough healing items on hand, you could pretty much endure the fights. But what I really remember the most is how awesome the soundtrack is. If it's an Enix game, then there's a great chance that music is going to be stellar. The game does have a major issue I want to bring up. Like a good amount of games did back in the day, if there's too much stuff on the screen, the game would slow down. Imagine trying to do platforming when the game changes speed on you. Needless to say, my youth, inexperience, and the slowdowns prevented me from beating the game, but it always stayed in my mind with a long-lasting impression. And just like with Dragon Quest, I went back to it as an adult and was able to beat it. The game isn't bad at all. I found it to be really fun and the puzzle solving was still satisfying. And to this day, I still randomly hum tunes from this game. Brainlord will always remain in my brain. Enix was a great publisher on their own, with great devs like Quintet and Tri-Ace working with them. Today, we still see the work they started flourish and continue to be enjoyed by gamers everywhere. Their old school titles introduced me to new concepts that I would grow to love and want to see in the video games of today. What are some of your favorite Enix games? Feel free to share them. Thank you for watching.